Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. I'm your host, and tonight we're heading to Oregon, a place most people think is just beautiful forests and rainy cities. But what if I told you there are things happening there that nobody talks about? Things that make people disappear. Things that change ordinary folks into something else entirely. Tonight, I've got 8 true horror stories from Oregon that will make your blood run cold. You'll hear from a waitress who discovered her restaurant was serving more than just food to customers, a park ranger who found out why hikers keep vanishing in Crater Lake, and a fisherman who wishes he never went 20 miles offshore that day. These are real people telling real stories that most channels won't touch. If you're new to Mr. Midnight, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we bring you the scariest true stories you've never heard before. Now grab a blanket, turn down those lights, and whatever you do, don't watch this alone. Let's begin with our first story. My name is Jenny Walsh, and I'm telling you this story because I don't have much time left. What happened in McMinnville changed me in ways I can't undo, and if you're listening to this, it means I'm probably already gone. But someone needs to know what's really happening in small Oregon towns and why you should never, ever trust food that makes you feel too good. I've been a server for 8 years, working my way through every type of restaurant you can imagine. I thought I'd seen it all: health code violations, drunk customers, kitchen fires. I even worked at a place in Portland where the owner was laundering money through fake orders. But nothing prepared me for what I discovered at Harvest Table in McMinnville. McMinnville is one of those towns that looks perfect from the outside. Population 35,000, surrounded by vineyards and farmland, the kind of place where everyone knows each other and nothing bad ever happens. Harvest Table sits right on 3rd Street in a converted 1,920 farmhouse, all exposed beams and vintage charm. The owners, Sarah and Mike Chen, bought it in 2019 and turned it into the most popular farm-to-table restaurant in Yamhill County. I started working there in June 2021, and at first, everything seemed normal. Good tips, friendly regulars, decent management. The only weird thing was how obsessed our customers were with the food. I mean, people loved eating there, but it went beyond normal restaurant loyalty. Some regulars would drive from Portland just for lunch. Others would call ahead to make sure we weren't sold out of their favorite dishes. But I figured that was just good cooking. Everything changed on August 15th, 2021. I remember the exact date because it was the day my life became a nightmare. A man in an expensive suit walked into the restaurant that Tuesday afternoon. He looked wrong for McMinnville. Too polished, too corporate. He introduced himself as Dr. Marcus Chen, Sarah's cousin, and said he worked for Pacific Agriculture Solutions, a research company developing sustainable food additives. We're running a pilot program to reduce food waste and improve nutritional absorption, he explained to our staff during a meeting after closing. The supplements I'm providing will enhance your customers' satisfaction with smaller portions while improving their overall health. The supplements came in small amber bottles with handwritten labels. No corporate logos, no FDA approval numbers. Just clear liquid that Dr. Chen said was derived from traditional Pacific Northwest botanical sources. He showed us how to add exactly 3 drops per gallon to our salad dressings and soup bases. The effects are subtle but profound, he said, his eyes never quite meeting ours. Customers will feel more satisfied, more connected to the food. It's completely natural and harmless. Sarah seemed nervous but excited. She'd been struggling with food costs, and Dr. Chen promised the supplements would reduce waste and increase customer loyalty. He even offered to pay us a bonus for participating in the study. I should have asked more questions. I should have demanded to see research documents or FDA approvals. But the money was good, and Dr. Chen had this way of making everything sound legitimate and beneficial. The first week after we started using the supplements, our customers seemed happier than ever. People who normally ordered large portions were satisfied with smaller meals. They'd finish eating and just sit there with these blissful expressions, like they'd found exactly what they'd been searching for their whole lives. "Jenny, I don't know what you're doing differently, but this food is incredible," said Tom Henderson, a regular who usually complained about everything. "I can't stop thinking about that soup. I dreamed about it last night." That should have been my first warning sign. People don't dream about restaurant soup. By the second week, our regulars, we were coming in more frequently. Tom started showing up every day at exactly 12:30, ordering the same thing, It's whatever soup we had that day. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who used to eat lunch with us once a week, began coming in every morning for breakfast, every afternoon for lunch, and sometimes for dinner too. Other food just tastes wrong now, she told me, looking almost embarrassed. I tried to eat at home yesterday, but everything tasted like cardboard. I couldn't even swallow it. I started paying closer attention to customer behavior. People seemed anxious if they couldn't get their usual table. If the kitchen was running slow, customers would pace, check their watches, even snap at each other. Some would start sweating if their food took longer than usual. One evening, I watched a man I'd never seen before stand outside our locked door for 3 hours before we opened for dinner. When I asked if he needed help, he said he'd driven from Salem just to eat our butternut squash soup. I can't explain it, he said, his hands shaking slightly. I tried to stay home, but I kept thinking about that soup. I couldn't concentrate on anything else. I had to come. During Dr. Chen's weekly check-ins, I mentioned the increasingly strange customer behavior. Instead of concern, I saw satisfaction in his eyes. The supplements are working exactly as intended, he said, making notes in a black leather journal. Your customers are developing a healthy relationship with nutritious food. They're breaking free from the processed food addiction that plagues most Americans. But it didn't feel healthy. It felt like addiction, pure and simple. 3 months into the program, things got worse. Customers who missed more than a day or two at the restaurant would show up looking sick, pale, shaky, sometimes vomiting. Dr. Chen explained this as detox symptoms from breaking their processed food habits. Their bodies are rejecting the artificial chemicals that they've been consuming for years, he said. The supplements are helping them purge toxins. It's temporary discomfort for long-term health benefits. One night, I decided to investigate for myself. I stayed after closing and went into the walk-in cooler where we stored the supplement bottles. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, I held one of the bottles up and really looked at it for the first time. The liquid wasn't completely clear like I'd thought. When I tilted the bottle, I could see tiny dark specks floating inside, moving in ways that seemed too purposeful to be random particles. They clustered together, separated, clustered again, like they were communicating. I took a drop of the supplement and put it under the food safety microscope we used for contamination testing. What I saw made my stomach turn. The specks weren't plant matter or minerals, they were alive. Tiny, worm-like organisms writhing and pulsing with their own internal rhythm. As I watched, they began to cluster together, forming larger, more complex structures. And then one of them turned toward the microscope lens, as if it could see me watching. I jerked back from the microscope, knocking over a stack of plates. In the crash and clatter, I heard something else. A high-pitched whining sound, like feedback from a microphone. It was coming from the supplement bottle. I grabbed my phone and tried to call the number on Dr. Chen's business card. The number was disconnected. I searched online for Pacific Agriculture Solutions, CS. The website was gone. Every research study and document he'd shown us had vanished from the internet. But I found something else. Buried in a Portland State University graduate student's thesis on parasitology, I found a reference to Oregonensis manipulans, a theoretical parasitic organism that could alter host behavior through neurochemical manipulation. The thesis had been withdrawn from publication, but I found a cached copy. According to the Bradlist research, the organism was discovered in soil samples from old-growth forests in the Oregon Cascades. It could survive in liquid solutions and remain dormant until ingested by a mammalian host. Once active, it migrated to the brain and began secreting compounds that created intense cravings for whatever food had been the delivery vehicle. The thesis described the organism as potentially beneficial for treating eating disorders and addiction, but warned about the ethical implications of using it without informed consent. The final note mentioned that all research had been terminated due to concerning behavioral changes in test subjects. The author of the thesis was listed as Dr. Marcus Chen. I should have run then. I should have grabbed my things and left town immediately. Instead, I made the mistake of confronting Sarah about what I'd discovered. Sarah, we need to stop using those supplements immediately, I told her the next morning before opening. Dr. Chen isn't who he says he is, and those aren't plant extracts. They're some kind of parasite. Sarah's reaction told me everything I needed to know. Instead of shock or concern, she just looked tired. Jenny, You weren't supposed to find that out so soon, she said, locking the front door behind her. Dr. Chen said most people wouldn't figure it out for at least 6 months. You knew? I backed toward the kitchen, my heart racing. You knew we were feeding parasites to our customers? Do you see how happy they are? Sarah's voice took on the same dreamy quality I'd been hearing from customers. Do you see how healthy they've become? No more obesity, no more binge eating, no more food addiction. We're helping people, Jenny. That's when I noticed Sarah's eyes. The pupils were dilated, and there was something moving just beneath the surface of the whites, tiny dark threads wiggling like worms. You're infected too, I whispered. We all are, she said, smiling. Dr. Chen added, the supplements to the staff meal yesterday. You ate the pasta salad, remember? You're one of us now. The room started spinning. I remembered the pasta salad, how incredibly delicious it had tasted, how I'd gone back for seconds even though I was full, how I'd been thinking about it ever since. I ran for the back door, but my legs felt heavy and uncoordinated. Behind me I could hear Sarah laughing. There's nowhere to go, Jenny. You'll be back. They always come back. I made it to my car and drove straight to the hospital in McMinnville. I told the emergency room doctor that I'd been exposed to parasites and needed immediate treatment. He looked at me like I was having a mental breakdown. Miss Walsh, I understand you're upset, but there's no evidence of parasitic infection, he said, after running blood tests and x-rays. Everything looks normal. Perhaps you should speak with someone about these anxiety symptoms. But I could feel them inside me, tiny movements in my stomach, behind my eyes, in my brain. When I looked in the mirror, I could see dark threads moving beneath my skin. I drove to Portland and checked into a hotel, determined to find a doctor who would take me seriously. But by the third day, I couldn't think about anything except the food at Harvest Table. My mouth watered constantly. Other food tasted like ash and made me nauseous. On the fourth day, I found myself driving back to McMinnville without remembering making the decision. I parked outside Harvest Table and sat in my car for hours, staring at the building. Other people were doing the same thing. Sitting in their cars, waiting for opening time, their faces blank and hungry. When the doors opened at 11 a.m., we all walked in together like sleepwalkers. I ordered the butternut squash soup without looking at the menu. It tasted better than anything I'd ever eaten in my life. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. Welcome back, Jenny, Sarah said, setting down a glass of water that I knew contained more supplements. Dr. Chen wants to speak with you. Dr. Chen was waiting in the back office, still wearing that expensive suit. Up close, I could see the dark threads moving beneath his skin too, but his were thicker, more numerous, almost covering his entire face. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, he said, his voice harmonizing with itself like multiple people speaking at once. But you'll understand soon. The organisms aren't parasites, they're partners. They're helping humanity evolve beyond its destructive relationship with food and consumption. You're turning people into addicts, I managed to say, though part of me was already starting to believe him. The soup had made me feel so much better, so much clearer. Addicts crave things that harm them, Dr. Chen replied. Our hosts crave what heals them, what nourishes them, what connects them to something greater than themselves. He showed me charts and graphs documenting the health improvements in McMinnville residents over the past 3 months. Weight loss, improved cardiovascular health, decreased anxiety and depression, lower crime rates. The statistics were undeniable. We're expanding to 12 more Oregon towns this year, he said. Eventually, we'll have a network of connected communities, all working together toward a common goal. Imagine a world without obesity, without eating disorders, without the constant anxiety of choice. Imagine being part of something bigger than your individual wants and needs. As he spoke, I could feel my resistance weakening. The organisms in my brain were releasing chemicals that made his words sound reasonable, even beautiful. Part of me recognized the manipulation, but a larger part was too tired to fight anymore. That was 6 months ago. I've been living in McMinnville ever since, eating at Harvest Table every day, watching more people join our community. The organisms have grown stronger inside me. Sometimes I can feel them thinking, planning, communicating with the others through networks I don't fully understand. I'm recording this message during one of my increasingly rare moments of clarity, when the organisms are dormant and I can think like my old self again. These moments are getting shorter and further apart. Soon, I don't think there will be any of the original Jenny left. Dr. Chen was right about one thing. I am healthier than I've ever been. My body is perfectly nourished, my mind is usually at peace, and I feel connected to something vast and purposeful. But the cost is my humanity, my free will, my individual consciousness. The organisms are spreading beyond Oregon now. I've seen news reports about strange eating behaviors in Washington and Northern California. Restaurant chains with unusual customer loyalty, health food stores where people shop with that same blissful, empty expression I see in the mirror every day. If you're listening to this and you live anywhere in the Pacific Northwest, be careful what you eat. If restaurant food starts tasting too good, if you find yourself craving specific dishes, if other food loses its appeal, its life, leave immediately. Don't finish your meal, don't go back, and whatever you do, don't let them convince you it's for your own good. The organisms don't just want to control what you eat. They want to control what you think, what you feel, what you are. And once they're inside you, once you've tasted that perfect satisfaction they offer, you'll never want to be human again. I can feel them waking up now. The clarity is fading and the hunger is returning. In a few minutes, I'll delete this recording and walk to Harvest Table for dinner, just like I do every night. I'll order the soup, smile at the other hosts, and pretend everything is normal. But maybe, if you're smart, if you're careful, you can avoid becoming what I've become. Maybe you can stay human long enough to warn others. The organisms are spreading faster now. They're hungry and they're looking for new hosts. Don't let them find you. My name is Tom Peterson, and I've been driving snowplows for the Oregon Department of Transportation for 12 winters. I know these roads like the back of my hand. Every curve, every hill, every spot where the wind likes to pile up snow. I've worked through blizzards that would make most people hide in their houses, and I've pulled more cars out of ditches than I can count. People think snowplow driving is just about pushing snow around, but it's not. We're the ones who keep the highways open when everyone else goes home. We work when it's dark, when it's cold, and when visibility drops to nothing. The state gives us good training, defensive driving, equipment maintenance, emergency response. I've got my CDL with all the right endorsements, and I know how to handle a 40,000-pound truck in conditions that would terrify most drivers. But what happened during the February 2021 blizzard changed everything I thought I knew about helping people. Some rescues don't end the way they're supposed to, and some decisions haunt you forever. The storm hit Central Oregon on a Thursday night, and it was the worst I'd seen in 20 years. The National Weather Service was calling it a historic weather event, which is code for stay off the roads if you want to live. But that's exactly when guys like me earn our paychecks. I was assigned to Highway 97 between Bend and Redmond, about a 20-mile stretch that connects two of the biggest towns in Central Oregon. It's usually a busy road, even in winter, but that night it was like a ghost highway. The snow was coming down so hard that my wipers could barely keep up, and the wind was pushing it sideways across the road in sheets. My truck was a 2019 Freightliner with a 12-foot front blade and a sand spreader in the back. Good equipment, well-maintained, with four-wheel drive and chains on all 6 tires. The cab was heated and had all the latest communication gear, radio, GPS, emergency beacon. I'd been driving for 16 hours straight with mandatory overtime, but the coffee was keeping me alert and the truck was running smooth. The problem was, I couldn't keep up with the snow. I'd plow a section clean, turn around, and by the time I got back to where I started, there would already be 3 inches covering the asphalt. The temperature was dropping fast, and what little traffic was left was crawling at maybe 15 miles per hour with hazard lights flashing. Around 11 p.m., my radio crackled to life. "Tom, we've got a family stranded about 5 miles south of Bend. Sedan slid off the highway and they're stuck in a snowbank. Can you respond?" "Copy that, dispatch. I'm maybe 10 minutes out." I found them easily enough. Their headlights were still on, cutting through the falling snow like lighthouse beams. It was a dark blue Honda Civic, and it was buried up to the windows. The snow had drifted around it like it had been there for hours, but I could see exhaust coming from the tailpipe, which meant the engine was still running. I parked my plow truck on the highway with the emergency flashers going and walked over to check on them. The driver's side window rolled down when I tapped on it, and a man in his 30s looked up at me with relief written all over his face. "Thank God," he said. "I'm Mike, this is my wife Sarah, and our kids Emma and Jake." We were driving home from visiting grandparents in Redmond when the visibility just disappeared. I could see the whole family inside, Mom in the passenger seat, 2 kids bundled up in the back. The little girl, Emma, looked about 8 years old. The boy, Jake, was maybe 5, and he was clutching a stuffed dinosaur. "Everyone okay in there?" I asked. "Cold, but we're all right," Sarah said. "We've got snacks and bottled water, and we've been running the heater." That worried me. They'd been sitting there for who knows how long, with the engine running and snow piled up around the exhaust. Carbon monoxide poisoning is a real danger in situations like this, especially with kids. I walked around the car to assess the situation. The snow was packed tight around the wheels and undercarriage. Even if I could plow them out, their little sedan didn't have the ground clearance to drive through what was on the road. "I'm going to try to clear you a path," I told Mike. "But this might take a while." I spent the next 30 minutes using my plow to push snow away from their car, but it wasn't working. Every time I moved a pile, more snow would blow back in. The storm was getting worse, and I was starting to worry about carbon monoxide building up in their car. I radioed for a tow truck, but dispatch came back with bad news. All available trucks are responding to accidents on the other highways. Might be 3 or 4 hours before we can get one to you. That's when I made the decision that still haunts me. The smart thing would have been to wait, to keep them warm in their car until help arrived. But I was worried about the exhaust situation, and the storm was getting worse by the minute. "Here's what we're gonna do," I told the family. "I'm going to load all of you into my truck and drive you back to town. We can deal with your car tomorrow when the storm passes." Mike looked uncertain. "Is that safe? I mean, your truck is a lot bigger than our car." "It's built for this weather," I said. "Chains on all the tires, 4-wheel drive, and it weighs 20 times what your car does. We'll take it slow and steady." Sarah looked at the kids. "What do you think, guys? Want to ride in a real snowplow truck?" Emma's eyes lit up. "Can we see the plow blade? When we get to town, I'll show you how everything works," I promised. Getting them transferred over was easy enough. I had a thermos of hot chocolate in the cab, and both kids perked up when they got their hands on it. Jake was fascinated by all the controls and gauges, and Emma kept asking questions about how the blade worked. "Do you push all the snow into the ditch?" she wanted to know. "Most of it," I said, backing the truck onto the highway. "Sometimes we have to load it into dump trucks and haul it away." Mike and Sarah were sharing the passenger seat, which wasn't exactly comfortable, but they seemed relieved to be moving again. I had the heater cranked up, and the cab was warm and dry. Outside, the snow was still coming down hard, but my headlights cut through it better than their cars had. I was driving slow, maybe 20 miles per hour, staying in the right lane and watching for ice. The weight of the truck and the chains were keeping us stable, but I knew better than to get overconfident in conditions like this. That's when everything went wrong. About 3 miles north of where I'd picked them up, I hit a patch of black ice that I never saw coming. Black ice is invisible under fresh snow, and it turns even the best tires into hockey pucks. The truck started sliding sideways toward the guardrail, and I could feel the back end coming around. I turned into the skid like they teach you, pumped the brakes, downshifted, everything you're supposed to do. But physics doesn't care about training when you're dealing with 40,000 pounds on ice. "Hold on," I shouted, but it was too late. We hit the guardrail, doing maybe 15 miles per hour, but the weight of the truck snapped the metal posts like toothpicks. The truck tipped over the edge and started rolling down the embankment. I remember the headlights spinning across the trees, Sarah screaming, and the awful sound of metal twisting and glass breaking. The truck rolled twice before slamming into a cluster of pine trees. The impact threw me against my door, and I felt something warm running down my face. Everything went quiet except for the hiss of steam coming from somewhere under the hood. When I came to, I was hanging upside, down in my seatbelt. My head was throbbing, and there was blood dripping into my eyes from a cut on my forehead. The cab was tilted at a crazy angle, and I could smell gasoline. "Everyone okay?" I called out, but my voice sounded weird and distant. Mike was unconscious, hanging next to me with his left arm bent at an angle that made my stomach turn. Sarah was awake and crying, trying to reach into the back seat where the kids were. "Emma? Jake? Can you hear Mommy?" Emma answered, but her voice was shaky. My head hurts, and Jake won't wake up. I twisted around to look at them. Emma had a deep cut on her forehead that was bleeding pretty bad, but she was alert. Jake was unconscious, and his breathing sounded wrong, raspy and irregular. The smell of gasoline was getting stronger, and I could see fuel dripping from somewhere underneath us. The truck's electrical system was making sparking sounds, and I knew we needed to get out fast. I managed to kick out what was left of the windshield and squeeze through the opening. The snow outside was knee-deep, and the cold hit me like a slap in the face. "Sarah, can you move?" I called back into the cab. "I think so," she said. "I need you to unbuckle yourself and crawl out here with Emma. Careful of the glass." Getting Sarah and Emma out took about 5 minutes. Emma was scared and crying, but she could walk. Sarah had some cuts and bruises, but nothing that looked serious. The problem was Mike and Jake. They were both trapped by twisted metal and the collapsed dashboard. Mike's arm was definitely broken, and Jake wasn't responding at all. "We have to get them out," Sarah said, trying to climb back toward the wreckage. "The truck could catch fire," I told her. "I'll get them, but I need you and Emma to stay back." I went back into the cab, trying to figure out how to free them. Mike was starting to come around, groaning and trying to move his broken arm. "Don't move," I told. "You're hurt pretty bad." "Where are my kids?" he asked. "Emma's safe. I'm working on Jake." But Jake wasn't responding to anything. His pulse was weak, and his breathing was getting worse. I tried CPR, but with the angle we were at and the twisted metal, I couldn't get him positioned right. The electrical sparking was getting worse, and I could see small flames starting to lick up from under the engine compartment. "Mike, I have to get you out of here right now," I said. He looked at me with glassy eyes. "Is Jake okay?" I wanted to lie, but I couldn't. "He's hurt bad, real bad." "Take care of Sarah and Emma," he whispered. "Promise me." "You're going to take care of them yourself," I said, but we both knew better. The flames were spreading fast, and the smoke was getting thick. I had to make a choice that no one should ever have to make. I grabbed Mike's good hand. "I'm sorry," I said. "I know," he whispered back. "Go." I climbed out of the wreckage and ran back to where Sarah and Emma were waiting in the snow. The truck was fully engulfed in flames now, and we could hear the gas tank building pressure. "Where are Daddy and Jake?" Emma asked. Sarah looked at me, and I think she already knew. I just shook my head. Sarah collapsed in the snow, screaming. Emma just stared at the burning truck with these empty eyes, like she couldn't process what was happening. "Why won't Daddy and Jake come out?" she asked me. "Are they still sleeping?" We waited in the snow for over an hour before another plow truck found us. Sarah had stopped screaming by then, but she wouldn't let go of Emma. The little girl kept asking when her daddy and brother were coming home. The rescue team recovered the bodies the next morning, after the fire had burned itself out. There wasn't much left to recognize. The official investigation ruled it an unavoidable accident caused by unprecedented weather conditions and hidden ice. Sarah sued the state for negligent operation, but the case was dismissed because I had been following proper emergency procedures. I quit my job 2 weeks later. Couldn't handle seeing another snowflake without hearing Emma ask why Jake wouldn't wake up. Took me 2 years before I could drive in winter weather again. And even now, when I see families stranded on the side of the road, I call for backup instead of trying to help them myself. Sometimes doing the right thing leads to the worst possible outcome. And sometimes the people you're trying to save end up paying the price for your good intentions. I still live in Bend, and I still see Sarah and Emma around town sometimes. Emma's 15 now, and she doesn't remember me. But Sarah does. She always looks away when our eyes meet, and I don't blame her. Some rescues just aren't meant to end well. My name is Maria Gonzalez, and I need to tell you what really happened in Portland between March 2022 and January 2024. The news reported it as a pharmaceutical company testing illegal drugs on food truck customers. They called it corporate misconduct, paid some fines, and moved on. But that's not the whole truth. What I experienced, what hundreds of us experienced, goes deeper than corporate greed. It goes to places that make you question if the people running this world are even human anymore. I've been running my taco truck in downtown Portland for 8 years now. Started with $3,000 in savings and a beat-up truck I bought from a guy who ran a hot dog stand behind Pioneer Square. I work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, serving tacos and burritos to office workers, construction crews, and college students. I've survived health inspectors, broken equipment, angry customers, kitchen fires, and even getting robbed at gunpoint twice. I thought I'd seen everything the streets could throw at me. I was wrong. The morning it started was Tuesday, March 15th, 2022. I remember the exact date because it was my daughter's birthday, and I was planning to close early to take her to dinner. The weather was typical: Portland, TMO, gray clouds, and a drizzle that made everything smell like wet concrete and car exhaust. I had my prep routine down to a science after all these years. Check propane tanks, fire up the grill, get rice and beans warming, slice onions and cilantro. My truck was parked in my usual spot on Southwest 5th Avenue, sandwiched between Paulo's coffee cart and an old guy named Frank who sold newspapers. The sound of my radio playing quietly mixed with the hiss of the grill and the distant rumble of morning traffic. Everything smelled like cooking meat, lime juice, and that damp Oregon air that gets into your bones. My hands were already stained green from cutting cilantro. Normal Tuesday morning, just like hundreds before it. That's when I saw him, walking toward my truck. A man in an expensive charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than I made in 2 months. Perfectly styled silver hair. Shoes that clicked on wet pavement like a metronome. He carried a leather briefcase and moved with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about rent money. "Excuse me, are you Maria Gonzalez, owner of this establishment?" His voice was smooth, practiced, like a politician or a salesman. I wiped my hands on my grease-stained apron. "Yeah, that's me. You ordering lunch or what?" "Actually, I have a business proposition that could change your life." He opened his briefcase carefully, protecting the contents from the drizzle. "Dr. Richard Morse, from Cascade Medical Research. We're conducting a community wellness initiative in underserved urban areas." The documents looked legitimate: official letterheads, government seals, signatures in blue ink. He explained that his company wanted to partner with local food vendors to distribute free vitamin supplements with meals. "We'd compensate you $2,500 monthly," he said, sliding a contract across my service window. Simple community outreach. Help working people feel better, more productive. Think of it as corporate social responsibility. $2,500 a month was more than my best profit month ever. That was enough to fix my dying freezer. Maybe start saving for the real restaurant I dreamed about. My daughter needed dental work we couldn't afford. My son wanted to join the high school robotics team, but the fees were $800. The vitamins came in unmarked white bottles with basic labels. Daily wellness supplement. Take one with food for increased energy and mood support. Dr. Morse said to focus on regular customers who seemed stressed, tired, or depressed from their jobs. These supplements represent years of research into nutritional deficiency in working populations, he explained. You're participating in legitimate DIME, community health improvement. For the first 3 weeks, everything seemed perfect. My customers loved getting free vitamins with their lunch. Construction workers said they felt more energetic. Office workers claimed reduced stress. Everyone was grateful, happy, spreading word about my truck to their friends. But then the changes started. James Rodriguez had been eating at my truck for 4 years. Construction foreman, tough as nails, treated every interaction like a business transaction. Always complained about something: TMB wait times, prices, whether I had enough hot sauce. Never smiled, never made small talk, paid exact change, and walked away. After taking vitamins for 3 weeks, James started acting like a different person. He began bringing me flowers, actual bouquets from grocery stores. Started staying to chat about his day, his family, his dreams. His eyes would light up when he saw me, like I was his daughter or something. "Maria, I don't know how to explain this," he said one Thursday, gripping his burrito like a lifeline. "But coming here, seeing you, it's become the most important part of my day. Like, I actually feel sick when I think about not coming here." Sarah Chen, who worked at a downtown law firm, started visiting my truck 4 times daily instead of her usual once. Morning coffee, lunch, afternoon snack, then again around 5 p.m. for food she didn't eat. "I can't focus at work unless I've seen you," she told me, her hands shaking slightly as she held her coffee. "It's like I'm not complete unless I've been here. Does that sound crazy?" The pattern repeated with every customer taking vitamins. They became obsessively attached, emotionally dependent, spending money they didn't have on food they didn't need just to stand near my truck. People who used to complain about everything became unnaturally agreeable. When I made mistakes with orders, they thanked me anyway. It wasn't customer loyalty. It was something else, something wrong. I called Dr. Morse to report the strange behavior. He answered immediately, like he'd been waiting. Increased customer satisfaction is beneficial for your business, Maria. Strong customer relationships drive revenue growth. But they're acting obsessed. I insisted. This isn't normal. Proper nutrition improves mood and social bonding. What you're observing is optimal consumer behavior. Continue the program as directed. His tone was flat, clinical, like he was reading from a script. When I pressed for more information, he hung up. That night, I decided to test a vitamin myself. I took one with dinner around 8 p.m., expecting maybe mild energy or mood improvement. What happened over the next 4 hours was terrifying. I felt overwhelming love for everyone I encountered. Not normal affection, artificial, chemically induced euphoria that made me want to hug strangers, give away money, make everyone around me happy regardless of cost or consequences. I drove to a 24-hour grocery store and nearly bought $500 worth of food to hand out to homeless people. I called my ex-husband, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, and told him I forgave him for everything. The feeling wasn't natural. It was like someone had rewired my brain to eliminate normal social boundaries and financial judgment. I gave away over $600 worth of free food the next day because seeing disappointed customers caused actual physical pain. A homeless man asked for change, and I emptied my cash register. When a customer complained about wait time, I nearly cried and offered free meals for a month. The effect lasted 3 full days. When it finally faded, I felt hollow, confused, angry. Whatever was in those vitamins wasn't promoting health. It was hijacking brain chemistry to create artificial emotional responses. I researched Cascade Medical Research online. The website looked professional, but clicking deeper revealed it was registered only 6 months earlier. No staff directory, no research publications, no FDA registrations. Dr. Richard Morse didn't exist in any medical database. I contacted Portland State University's pharmacy program. A graduate student named Mike Chen agreed to analyze the vitamins for $300 cash, no questions asked. He said results would take 2 weeks. When Mike called, his voice was shaking. "Maria, what the fuck are these things? They contain synthetic MDMA, an experimental dopamine reuptake inhibitor, and something I can't even identify. This combination would create artificial emotional attachment to whoever provides the drug. It's chemical brainwashing." I'd been turning my customers into addicts for over a month. These people trusted me, and I'd been poisoning their minds without knowing it. I immediately stopped distributing vitamins and tried contacting every affected customer. That's when things got really dark. James had a complete psychological breakdown when I explained I couldn't give him more vitamins. He sat outside my truck crying for 6 hours, begging me not to abandon him. When I tried to leave, he grabbed my arm and said he'd rather die than lose access to me. Sarah was hospitalized for severe depression and suicide ideation when withdrawal symptoms hit. She'd written a 47-page letter about how I was the only thing keeping her alive. Other customers became violent. A guy named Marcus, who'd been taking vitamins for a month, threatened to burn down my truck if I didn't give him what he needed. A woman named Lisa started following me home, convinced we were in a romantic relationship. When I called Dr. Morse to confront him, his friendly mask disappeared completely. "You signed a binding contract, Maria. Breach of agreement carries severe financial and legal penalties. Continue distribution or face litigation that will destroy your business and personal finances. You turn my customers into drug addicts." We optimized consumer attachment for market research purposes. Discontinuing the program violates your contractual obligations and NDAs. Maintain protocol or face consequences. The line went dead. I contacted Oregon Health Authority and FDA, providing vitamin samples and lab analysis. What happened next revealed the true scope of horror. Federal agents discovered that Dr. Morse was actually Dr. Vincent Harrison, Chief Research Officer at Nexus Pharmaceuticals. His company had been conducting illegal human trials across 17 cities, targeting food trucks in low-income areas to test experimental drugs designed to create psychological dependency. But it wasn't just about customer loyalty. Internal company documents revealed the real purpose: developing chemical agents for military and intelligence applications. They were testing how to make entire populations emotionally dependent on specific individuals, locations, or experiences. The food truck program was just field testing for larger population control experiments. Over 2,400 people across multiple cities had been secretly drugged and psychologically manipulated. Food trucks, coffee carts, convenience stores, we'd all been turned into unwitting distributors for pharmaceutical weapons designed to control human behavior. The investigation uncovered company emails discussing behavioral modification in civilian populations and chemical intervention in democratic processes. They weren't just studying addiction, they were developing tools to make people emotionally dependent on political figures, brands, or ideologies. But here's where the real horror begins. Nexus Pharmaceuticals had contracts with the Department of Defense and CIA dating back to 2019. The company received $847 million in classified funding for psychological operations research. Our food truck program was partially funded by taxpayer money through shell companies and defense contractors. When the story broke, Nexus hired Thompson & Associates, a crisis management firm that specializes in burying corporate scandals. Within 48 hours, news coverage shifted from illegal human experimentation to regulatory oversight failure. The focus moved from criminal conspiracy to bureaucratic incompetence. Nexus executives testified before Congress, expressing regret for procedural violations while denying intentional wrongdoing. They claimed the drugs were intended for legitimate antidepressant research and that field testing protocols were misunderstood by local coordinators. Dr. Harrison received 2 years minimum security prison. The company paid $127 million in fines, $2,500 in fines, less than they'd made in profits from defense contracts that year. No one went to federal prison. No one lost medical licenses. The executive team received bonuses for crisis management effectiveness. My customers and I received settlement payments ranging from $12,000 to $35,000, contingent on signing NDAs prohibiting us from discussing details of our experiences or naming company personnel. But the real horror wasn't the corporate cover-up or government complicity. It was discovering how many other programs were still running. During legal discovery, we found references to Project Mindbridge, ongoing research into chemical behavior modification in nursing homes, elementary schools, and military bases. Operation Consensus involved testing emotional manipulation drugs through hospital IV drips and prison food services. The documents reference collaboration with social media companies to identify optimal psychological intervention targets and partnerships with pharmaceutical distributors to embed experimental compounds in common medications. When whistleblower attorneys tried to expand the investigation, they faced death threats, professional sabotage, and mysterious car accidents. 3 lawyers withdrew from the case, citing family safety concerns. One disappeared entirely for 6 weeks, before surfacing in a psychiatric facility with no memory of the previous month. We formed a support group for affected individuals, but it was infiltrated by company representatives posing as victims. People who spoke too openly about ongoing health effects were discredited through social media campaigns and false medical records. James Rodriguez committed suicide 8 months after the program ended. His suicide note mentioned being unable to escape the chemical love he'd felt and how normal life felt empty without it. Sarah Chen developed severe agoraphobia and hasn't left her apartment in over a year. I testified before a congressional subcommittee, but my testimony was classified and removed from public record. The official report concluded that Nexus had violated FDA protocols but found no evidence of intentional harm or ongoing programs. I used my settlement money to leave Oregon entirely, moved to a small town in New Mexico where I opened a small restaurant. But I still get calls from unknown numbers, people asking about my research participation and whether I've experienced any ongoing symptoms. 3 months ago, I found unmarked vitamin bottles in my new restaurant supply delivery. Same white bottles, same basic labels. When I called the supplier, they claimed no knowledge of how the bottles got there. Last week, customers at my new restaurant started acting unusually friendly and attached, too grateful, too happy, staying too long just to be near me. When I checked my security cameras, I found footage of someone in a Nexus Pharmaceuticals uniform tampering with my food supplies at 3 a.m. The program never ended, it just moved underground. I'm telling this story because people need to know that what happened in Portland wasn't an isolated incident. It was a field test for something larger, something that's still happening. The chemical behavior modification research continues in nursing homes, schools, hospitals, and prisons across the country. Every time you feel unusually attached to a brand, a politician, or a product, ask yourself why. Every time a community suddenly supports something they used to oppose, question what changed. Because sometimes the most dangerous experiments are the ones you never know you're part of. They didn't just test drugs on us, they tested whether Americans would accept chemical manipulation if it was packaged as corporate wellness or community improvement. We passed that test, and now they know exactly how to control us. My name is Carlos Martinez, and I've been working the docks at the Port of Astoria for 7 years. I started when I was 25, right after my dad got me the job through his union connections. The work is hard, loading and unloading massive cargo containers from ships that come in from all over the world. Your back aches every day, your hands get torn up from the chains and cables, but it pays well enough to support my wife and 2 kids. I thought I knew everything about dock work: how to operate the cranes, how to read shipping manifests, how to spot damaged containers before they cause problems. I've worked through storms that made the ships rock like toy boats, handled cargo worth millions of dollars, and dealt with every kind of dangerous shipment you can imagine. But what happened during the night shift in September 2020 showed me there are some things in this world that no amount of experience can prepare you for. What I'm about to tell you is the reason I don't sleep anymore. Why my wife left me 6 months ago, taking our kids to her mother's house in Portland. Why I drink myself unconscious every night just to stop seeing their faces. The dead ones. The ones who whisper my name from inside the shipping containers. It all started because of COVID. The port cut day shifts and moved most operations to overnight to reduce contact between workers. I got assigned to the graveyard shift, midnight to 8 a.m. At first, I hated it, coming home when my family was just waking up, sleeping while they lived their lives, missing dinner every night. But the pay was better, and we needed the money. The Port of Astoria sits right where the Columbia River meets the Pacific Ocean. On foggy nights, which is most nights, you can barely see 50 feet in any direction. The massive cranes look like metal dinosaurs in the mist, and the sound of waves against the dock never stops. Container ships come in like floating cities, their lights cutting through the darkness as they navigate the channel. But there's something else about that place at night. Something wrong. The older workers talk about it sometimes, when they've had a few beers after shift. Ships that dock empty but leave full. Containers that feel warm to the touch even in winter. Sounds coming from sealed cargo that couldn't possibly be making noise. Most nights were routine. A ship would dock around 10 p.m., and we'd spend the next 6 hours unloading containers onto trucks for transport inland to Portland, Seattle, or wherever they needed to go. Each container has paperwork, bills of lading, customs forms, inspection certificates. Everything has to match up perfectly, or the whole shipment gets held up. The crew I worked with was small but experienced. There was Rick, my supervisor, who'd been at the port for 15 years. He knew every regulation, every shortcut, every trick to keep cargo moving efficiently. Then there was Miguel and Dave, both solid workers who'd been there almost as long as me. We worked like a machine, rarely needing to talk much to get the job done. But in October, I started noticing something strange. Certain containers were handled differently. They came with special paperwork that Rick kept separate from the regular manifests. The trucks that picked these containers up always arrived after midnight, when most of the regular truckers had gone home. And the drivers weren't the usual guys we knew. They were serious-looking men in tactical gear who carried guns openly. The containers were always marked as medical supplies or hospital equipment, but something felt wrong about them. They were much heavier than typical medical gear. When we loaded them onto the trucks, they made the suspension groan under the weight. And sometimes, late at night when the fog was thick, I swear I could hear things moving inside them. Priority shipments for hospitals, Rick explained when I asked. COVID emergency supplies. The dime, armed escorts are because the stuff is valuable and there've been thefts. That made sense, I guess. People were desperate for medical equipment during the pandemic. But these drivers didn't act like regular security guards. They moved like soldiers, checking corners and watching rooftops like they expected trouble. They barely spoke to us, just pointed where they wanted the containers loaded and watched every move we made. The first thing that really bothered me happened on a Tuesday night in late October. I was operating the crane to move one of the medical supply containers when the cable slipped. The container dropped about 3 feet and hit the dock hard. The impact split open one corner, and the metal peeled back like opening a can. What I saw inside made my blood freeze. Bodies, human bodies, stacked like cordwood. Some were fresh, their skin still pink and soft. Others had been dead longer, their flesh gray and bloated. Men, women, even children. All naked, all with their eyes removed and strange symbols carved into their foreheads. But the worst part wasn't the bodies themselves. It was that some of them were still moving. Fingers twitching, mouths opening and closing like they were trying to speak. One woman's head turned toward me, and even though her eye sockets were empty black holes, I felt her looking right at me. I screamed and stumbled backward, falling hard on the concrete. The crane controls swung wildly, and the container slammed back down, sealing the split closed. Rick was there in seconds, helping me to my feet. But his face wasn't concerned. It was angry. "Carlos, listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice cold. "You didn't see anything. We're going to report this as a minor equipment malfunction, and you're never going to mention what you think you saw to anyone. Rick, there are dead people in there. We have to call the police." "There are no dead people," he said firmly. "You've been working too many night shifts. You're hallucinating, seeing things that aren't there." But I knew what I'd seen. I could still smell the death, the rot, the chemical preservatives, and I could hear them. Soft scratching sounds from inside the container, like fingernails on metal. Over the next few weeks, the nightmares started. I'd dream about those empty eye sockets, about fingers reaching through container walls, about voices calling my name from dark places. My wife said I was talking in my sleep, speaking words in languages she'd never heard before. The pattern continued. Every 2 weeks, the same Panamanian-flagged cargo ship would dock. The crew was different each time, but they all had the same look in their eyes. Dead, empty. Like they'd seen too much and lost pieces of their souls. They'd unload the same type of containers, always marked as medical supplies, always picked up by the same armed drivers. But now I knew the truth. These weren't weapons shipments. They were human trafficking on a scale I couldn't comprehend. Bodies being moved like cargo, some dead, some barely alive, all destined for something unspeakable. I started taking pictures with my phone when no one was looking. Container numbers, license plates, faces of the drivers. But every photo came out wrong. Blurry. Distorted, like something was interfering with the camera. In some shots, I could see shapes in the background that hadn't been there when I took the picture. Pale figures standing at the edge of the frame, watching. The license plates led me to a private security company based in Eastern Oregon. When I looked them up online, their website was professional but vague, corporate shell companies, forwarding addresses, phone numbers that went to voicemail. But late at night, when I searched deeper into the dark web, I found references to human sacrifice, ritual murders, organ harvesting. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't just witnessing human trafficking. I was helping facilitate some kind of cult operation, moving bodies for ritual purposes. The thought made me sick, but I knew I had to be careful. If Rick was involved, and he clearly was, then speaking up the wrong way could get me killed. I decided to contact the FBI through their anonymous tip line. I uploaded all the photos I'd taken and wrote a detailed description of what I'd witnessed. But when I tried to submit the report, my computer crashed. Every time I tried to send the information, the same thing happened. Then the phone calls started. Middle of the night, heavy breathing, whispered threats in languages I didn't recognize. My wife begged me to change our number, but it didn't matter. They always found the new one. One night, I came home to find our cat dead on the kitchen table. Its eyes had been removed, and the same symbols I'd seen carved on the bodies were scratched into its fur. My wife screamed and wouldn't stop shaking. She packed a bag that night and took our kids to her mother's house. "I can't do this anymore, Carlos," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Whatever you're involved in, whatever's happening to you, I can't watch it destroy our family." She left, and I was alone. The next shipment arrived a week later. Rick assigned me to work that container personally, watching me the entire time. As I attached the crane cables, I could hear them inside. Not just movement now, but voices. Dozens of voices, calling my name, begging for help. "Can you hear them, Carlos?" Rick asked, his voice different somehow. Deeper, like multiple people speaking in unison. I looked at him and saw that his eyes had changed. They were completely black, reflecting the dock lights like an animal's. When he smiled, his teeth were too sharp, too many. "You've been chosen," he said. "The others tried to run, tried to expose us. Miguel disappeared last month, Dave quit and moved to California. But you're still here. You keep coming back. That means you're one of us now." I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The fog around us had thickened into something solid, pressing against me like invisible hands. The crane controls moved by themselves, lifting the container and swinging it toward an open truck. Through the split in the metal, I could see them clearly now. Dozens of bodies, but they were all moving, all turning to look at me with those empty eye sockets. And they all had my face. "Welcome to the family," Rick said, and his voice was coming from inside the container now, from all those twisted versions of myself. That was 3 months ago. I still work at the port. I still load those containers. But now I know what's really in them. And I know that someday soon, I'll be in one too. The funny thing is, I can't quit. Every time I try to leave, I find myself back at the dock at midnight, putting on my hard hat and safety vest like nothing happened. The keys are always in my pocket. The crane always responds to my touch. My wife doesn't return my calls anymore. My kids don't know their father is dead inside, just going through the motions of living while something else wears his skin. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the crane cab, I see them in the reflection of the windows. All the other workers who came before me. Miguel, Dave, and dozens of others I never knew. All with black eyes and too many teeth. All smiling and waving like we're old friends. They tell me it won't hurt when my time comes. They tell me I'll understand everything once I'm in the container with them. Once the symbols are carved into my forehead and my eyes are taken for the collection. I'm telling you this story because I need someone to know the truth. The Port of Astoria is still operating. Ships still come and go every night. New workers get hired when the old ones disappear. If you ever get offered a job there, especially on the night shift, don't take it, don't go near that place after dark. And if you see containers marked as medical supplies being loaded by armed guards, just keep driving. Because some jobs don't let you quit. Some workplaces become prisons. And some coworkers aren't human anymore. I can hear the ship's horn now. Time for another shift. Time to load more containers. Time to pretend I don't know what's inside them, what they're really for, where they're really going. My name is Carlos Martinez, and I've been dead for 3 months. But they still make me work the docks at the Port of Astoria. And tomorrow night, they're gonna make me join the others in the container. I just hope, when they carve those symbols into my forehead, I'll finally be able to stop remembering what it felt like to be human. My name is David Thompson, and for 8 years I was the night custodian at Roosevelt Middle School in Eugene, Oregon. I know that doesn't sound like much, but cleaning up after 400 kids taught me things most people never learn. Like how to spot blood that's been scrubbed but not bleached. How to tell if a stain is from vomit or something worse. How the smell of fear lingers in empty hallways long after the screaming stops. I thought I'd seen everything in those dark corridors. Broken bones from bullying, suicide attempts in bathroom stalls, teachers having breakdowns in supply closets. But what I discovered in the basement of Roosevelt Middle School in January 2022 wasn't just criminal negligence. It was something that still makes my hands shake when I try to sleep. Because some of those children didn't just get sick. Some of them changed. I started working nights at Roosevelt because my wife Emma was dying of cancer. The insurance barely covered her treatments, and the night shift paid an extra $3 an hour. I'd work from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., go home to take care of Emma, grab a few hours of sleep, then do it all again. She used to joke that I spent more time with the ghosts at school than with her. She wasn't wrong about the ghosts. Roosevelt Middle School was built in 1963 on land that used to be a lumber mill. Before that, it was a Kalapuya burial ground. The local tribes had protested the construction, but money talks louder than respect for the dead. 3 stories above ground, basement below, all built with the cheapest materials the state could find. The basement ran under the entire building, a maze of storage rooms, utility corridors, and forgotten spaces. That's where I kept my equipment and where the school stored everything they wanted to forget. Broken desks, moldy textbooks, boxes of records from students who'd graduated decades ago. And in the far corner, behind a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," the chemical storage area. I had clearance for that room. Part of my job was inventory and basic maintenance. The space was maybe 20 by 30 feet, with concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, and metal shelving for legitimate cleaning supplies. In the back corner sat a locked cage where they stored old science lab chemicals waiting for proper disposal, or at least, that's what I thought was in there. It was Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. I remember the exact date because it was 3 days before Emma's final chemo treatment. I was feeling hopeful that night, maybe a little careless. I unlocked the chemical storage room around 2 a.m. to grab fresh floor wax, and that's when the smell hit me. It wasn't just chemical, it was organic. Sweet and rotten, like fruit left in the sun mixed with something metallic, like blood and flowers and rust. The fluorescent lights were flickering worse than usual, casting shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. 3 metal barrels sat outside the locked cage, big industrial drums, 55 gallons each, with no labels or identification. They weren't there the week before. Dark stains spread out from underneath them, and the concrete around the barrels looked wrong. Pitted and discolored, like acid had been eating at it. But it was the sound that made my skin crawl. A low humming, almost like singing, coming from inside the barrels. I called Mrs. Anderson immediately. She'd been principal for 15 years, and I trusted her judgment. But when I described what I'd found, her voice changed. Got cold and sharp. "David, those are just old science lab chemicals. The disposal company will handle them this week. Don't go near them, and don't mention this to anyone. School board's been looking for reasons to cut more jobs." The threat was clear, but something in her tone bothered me, like she was reading from a script. By Friday, there were 7 barrels. The humming was louder, and I swear I could make out patterns in it, almost like voices whispering in a language I didn't recognize. The chemical stains had spread across half the storage room floor, and the concrete wasn't just discolored anymore, it was dissolving. Literally eating away, leaving holes that seemed to go deeper than they should. My eyes burned constantly now, not just watering but actual pain, like someone was rubbing sand under my eyelids. And I was having dreams. Terrible dreams about children with black eyes and chemical burns on their faces, reaching out to me with melted fingers. During my Friday night shift, I found the first dead rat. It was in the hallway, outside the chemical storage room, lying on its back with its legs in the air. But the weird thing was, it looked deflated, like something had sucked all the fluid out of it, leaving just fur and bones. And its eyes were completely black. Over the weekend, more rats appeared, all in the same condition, all forming a rough circle around the chemical storage area. By Monday morning, there were dozens of them. The maintenance day crew found them and blamed poison, but I knew better. Poison doesn't drain the life out of something like that. That's when the children started getting sick. It began with headaches and nausea during first period. Mrs. Martinez sent Tommy Castellanos to the nurse when he couldn't stop throwing up. But when I asked her what color it was, she went pale. It was black, David. Thick and black, like oil. More kids got sick throughout the week. Not just nausea now, but nosebleeds that wouldn't stop, rashes that appeared overnight. And the strangest thing, some of them started acting different, quieter, like they were listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear. Emma noticed the change in me too. I was losing weight, sleeping worse, jumping at shadows. She made me promise to see a doctor. But how do you explain to someone that you think the school where you work is poisoned by something that shouldn't exist? The breakthrough came when I decided to document everything. I took photos of the chemical spill, collected samples in mason jars, and drove them to a private lab in Portland. I told them it was urgent environmental testing. The lab called me back within hours. The technician sounded terrified. "Mr. Thompson, where did these samples come from? We've never seen anything like this. These aren't just industrial chemicals. There are organic compounds we can't identify, and they're active. Still changing, even in the sealed containers." That night, I went back to the school with a digital recorder and an EMF detector I'd borrowed from my brother-in-law. What I captured in that basement storage room convinced me we weren't dealing with ordinary chemical contamination. The humming was definitely voices now. Multiple voices, speaking in unison, but the language wasn't human. The EMF detector went crazy near the barrels, spiking into ranges that shouldn't be possible from chemical reactions. And when I played back the audio later, underneath the humming, I could hear children crying. Children who sounded like they were calling for help. I contacted the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality the next morning and sent them everything, photos, audio recordings, lab results. I told them about the dead animals, the sick children, and Mrs. Anderson's cover-up attempts. DEQ investigators arrived with hazmat suits and detection equipment that looked military-grade. They took one reading in the basement and immediately called for a full building evacuation. Every student, every teacher, everyone out within the hour. But when the hazmat team tried to approach the barrels, their equipment started malfunctioning. Geiger counters giving impossible readings, air quality monitors displaying error messages, communication devices picking up those same whispered voices I'd recorded. The team leader, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, pulled me aside after the initial assessment. "Mr. Thompson, in 20 years of environmental cleanup, I've never seen anything like this. These chemicals, they're not just toxic. They're changing at a molecular level, almost like they're alive. And the energy readings we're getting suggest some kind of ongoing reaction that shouldn't be possible." The investigation revealed the horrifying truth. The school district had hired Cascade Environmental Solutions, a company that existed only on paper. The real operation was run by a man named Rick Clemens, who'd been dumping industrial waste in school basements across 3 Oregon counties. But this wasn't ordinary industrial waste. Clemens had contracts with Hanford Nuclear Reservation cleanup crews, medical research facilities, and several defense contractors. He was dumping radioactive materials, experimental compounds, and biological waste that was supposed to be destroyed, not buried. And some of that waste had been interacting with the burial ground beneath the school. Dr. Chen's team found that the chemical reactions were being amplified by what she called geological anomalies, underground formations that concentrated and transformed the contamination into something unprecedented. The indigenous burial sites contained minerals and organic compounds that acted as catalysts, turning toxic waste into something that seemed almost sentient. Over 400 students and 50 staff members had been exposed to compounds that didn't exist in any textbook. They all needed immediate medical evaluation, but traditional treatments weren't effective. Some of the children developed symptoms that baffled doctors: our sensitivity to light, ability to hear frequencies outside normal human range, and in 3 cases, what appeared to be telepathic connections to each other. Mrs. Anderson and 2 district administrators were arrested, but the investigation revealed they'd been receiving payments from Clemens for years. They knew exactly what was being dumped, and they'd chosen money over children's lives. During her confession, Mrs. Anderson claimed she'd started hearing voices in her office at night, telling her to keep the basement sealed. Rick Clemens was found dead in his cell before trial. Apparent suicide, but the guards reported that his body showed signs of the same cellular breakdown they'd seen in the lab animals at Roosevelt, like something had drained the life out of him from the inside. The school was closed for 14 months. Environmental contractors had to excavate 30 feet down, removing not just contaminated soil, but the burial sites that had been disturbed during construction 60 years earlier. They worked in rotating shifts because crews couldn't stay on site for more than 4 hours without developing symptoms. During the cleanup, workers reported tools moving on their own, electronic equipment displaying impossible readings, and voices speaking from areas where no one was present. 3 workers quit after claiming they saw children in the excavation sites, TIZ, children with black eyes and chemical burns, reaching up from the contaminated earth. The Kalapuya Tribal Council worked with environmental engineers to properly rebury the disturbed remains, performing ceremonies that seemed to quiet whatever had been awakened by decades of contamination. The new school was built with their blessing and ongoing spiritual protection. I testified at the federal trial about the cover-up and the supernatural elements of the contamination. The prosecutors were skeptical until I played the audio recordings and showed them the footage of equipment behaving impossibly around the waste sites. The case established new federal protocols for investigating environmental crimes with anomalous characteristics. The CDC created a special research division to study the long-term effects of the Roosevelt exposure, because some of those children developed abilities that challenged our understanding of human biology. All exposed students and staff receive free medical monitoring for life, but it's not just cancer screenings. It's neurological testing, sensory evaluation, and psychological support for what the medical community calls enhanced perceptual sensitivity. Some of the children can sense environmental toxins at levels far below what instruments can detect. Others show resistance to radiation and chemical exposure that shouldn't be possible. They're not normal anymore. The contamination changed them at a cellular level, and we're still learning what that means. I was promoted to head of environmental safety for the entire Oregon Department of Education. My job now is investigating reports of anomalous contamination at schools across the Pacific Northwest. Because Roosevelt wasn't an isolated incident, we've found similar patterns at 17 other schools built on disturbed indigenous sites. Roosevelt Middle School reopened with the most advanced environmental monitoring systems in the country. But it's not just scientific equipment. The Kalapuya Tribal Council blessed the building and installed traditional protection symbols that seemed to prevent the kind of interaction that created the Roosevelt contamination. The children who were exposed are being monitored by a joint CDC-University research program. So far, none have developed cancers, but they've developed other changes: enhanced intuition, ability to sense danger, resistance to environmental toxins. It's like the contamination didn't just poison them, it evolved them. Emma died 3 months after the Roosevelt investigation concluded. But in her final weeks, she told me she was proud that I'd spoken up for those children. She said, "Sometimes the worst disasters create the strongest people." I still work in Oregon schools, but now I carry equipment that can detect more than just chemicals. Because what happened at Roosevelt taught me that some contamination isn't just environmental. It's spiritual, generational, and ongoing. When developers disturb sacred ground and fill it with poison, sometimes the earth itself fights back. And sometimes the children caught in between become something new. Not quite human anymore, but maybe something better adapted to survive in a contaminated world. I've seen those Roosevelt children as they've grown up. They're different, but they're not damaged. They're protective of each other and sensitive to environmental threats in ways that could save lives. Maybe the contamination didn't just hurt them. Maybe it prepared them for a future the rest of us can't see coming. But late at night, when I'm alone in empty school hallways, I still hear that humming. Those voices speaking in languages older than human memory, warning about dangers we're only beginning to understand. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think they're trying to protect us from something much worse than chemical contamination. Something that's still out there, waiting for the next sacred site to be disturbed, the next school to be built where it shouldn't be. Because the real horror isn't what we found in those barrels. It's what's still buried beneath half the schools in Oregon, waiting to wake up. My name is Tyler Kim, and I've been a bike messenger in downtown Portland for 3 years now. I deliver important papers, legal documents, and packages to offices all over the city. It's not glamorous work, but I know these streets better than anyone. I can get from the Pearl District to Pioneer Square in 12 minutes flat, even in heavy traffic. I've dodged cars, dealt with angry drivers, and delivered packages in every kind of weather Portland can throw at you. But what happened in November 2022 made me question everything I thought I knew about this city. Sometimes the streets you think you know can hide things that shouldn't exist. I first noticed him on a Tuesday morning in early November. I was making my usual rounds, delivering contracts to a law firm on 5th Street. There he was, a man in his 30s wearing a perfectly pressed gray suit and black tie. He was standing on the corner of 5th and Morrison, completely still, staring straight ahead with this blank expression on his face. At first, I figured he was just another businessman waiting for someone, or maybe having a smoke break. Portland's downtown is full of office workers in suits, but something about him stuck with me. Maybe it was how perfectly still he stood, like he was made of stone. 20 minutes later, I was delivering packages to a building in the Pearl District, about 2 miles away. That's when I saw him again. Same gray suit, same black tie, same blank stare. He was standing in front of a coffee shop on Northwest 13th Avenue, in the exact same position as before. I stopped my bike and checked my phone. There was no way he could have gotten from 5th and Morrison to the Pearl District that fast. Even if he had a car and hit every green light, it would have taken him at least 15 minutes. I had made the trip in 12 minutes on my bike, cutting through alleys and side streets that cars can't use. But there he was, looking exactly the same. Same pale skin, same perfectly combed hair, same expression. It was like he had never moved at all. Over the next few days, I started seeing the gray suit man everywhere. Always standing perfectly still, always staring straight ahead, always in that same outfit. I saw him outside the courthouse on Southwest 3rd, then 30 minutes later spotted him near the Max station on Northwest 1st. I saw him in Pioneer Square during lunch rush, then later that afternoon, standing in front of a bank on Southeast Grand. The distances were impossible. I knew because I was the one traveling between these locations, and I was on a bike. Portland's downtown traffic is thick, especially during business hours. Nobody could move between these spots faster than me, not unless they had a helicopter. I started asking other messengers if they'd seen him too. Jake, who's been doing this job for 8 years, knew exactly who I meant. "Oh, you mean the statue man," he said, adjusting his helmet strap. "Yeah, we all see him. Weird dude just stands around all day. Never seen him actually walk anywhere." My coworker Sarah nodded. "I've been wondering about him for weeks. He's always in different spots, but I never see him moving between them. It's like he just appears." That's when I knew I wasn't going crazy. Other people were seeing him too, but nobody could explain how he got around so fast. I decided to test whether he was following me specifically or if it was just random. Instead of taking my normal routes, I started making weird detours. I'd take the long way around blocks, cut through alleys I normally avoided, and change my delivery order to visit completely different parts of downtown. It didn't matter. No matter where I went or how random my route was, I would see the gray suit man at least 3 or 4 times during my shift. And he was always in the strangest places. I saw him standing on a fire escape outside a building on Southwest Broadway. The ladder was pulled up. There was no way to get up there from street level. I saw him in a narrow alley behind a restaurant that dead-ended into a brick wall. I even spotted him standing on a second-story ledge of an old building on Northwest Couch Street. These weren't places where a normal person could just stand around. They were places you'd need special equipment or permission to access. But there he was, every time, in that same gray suit. I started trying to take pictures of him with my phone. Every time I spotted him, I'd quickly pull out my phone and snap a photo. But when I checked the pictures later, they were always blurred or showed empty space where I had seen him standing. The first few times, I figured I was just taking bad pictures while riding my bike. So I started stopping completely, getting off my bike, and taking careful photos. The results were the same: blurry images of empty sidewalks and doorways. I tried approaching him directly a few times. I'd see him standing somewhere, park my bike, and walk over to where he was. But by the time I got there, he'd be gone. Not like he had walked away. There would be no sign that anyone had been there at all. No footprints, no scuff marks, nothing. What really freaked me out was watching other people around him. I'd see the gray suit man standing on a busy sidewalk, and pedestrians would walk right past him like he wasn't there. They didn't avoid him or acknowledge him in any way. It was like he was invisible to everyone except messengers and cyclists. I started asking shop owners and security guards if they'd seen a man in a gray suit hanging around their buildings. They'd look at me like I was crazy and say they hadn't seen anyone matching that description. "A man in a gray suit?" asked the security guard at the Pioneer Courthouse Square. "Sir, there are dozens of men in gray suits downtown every day. You'll have to be more specific." But when I tried to describe his exact appearance and dozen where I'd seen him standing for hours at a time, they had no idea what I was talking about. According to them, nobody had been standing in those spots. After 2 weeks of daily sightings, something changed. I started feeling like the gray suit man was trying to communicate with me somehow. He never spoke or moved, but I began to sense that he wanted me to follow him or go to specific locations. It's hard to explain, but when I'd see him, I'd get this feeling in my head, like a quiet voice suggesting I should go a certain direction. The feeling was strongest when I saw him near buildings I didn't usually deliver to or in parts of downtown I rarely visited for work. I was scared to follow these feelings. What if it was some kind of trap? What if this guy was dangerous? But the curiosity was eating at me. Who was he? How was he getting around so fast? And why did it seem like only delivery workers could see him? One rainy Thursday afternoon, I saw the gray suit man standing in front of an old office building on Southwest 2nd Avenue. The building had been empty for years, with chains on the doors and no trespassing signs in the windows. The city had been trying to demolish it, but there were always legal issues holding things up. This time, instead of disappearing when I got close, the gray suit man turned and walked straight through the locked front door. Not like he opened it, he walked through it like it was made of air. I stood there in the rain, staring at the door. This was impossible. People don't walk through solid doors. But I had just watched it happen with my own eyes. I tried the door, expecting it to be locked tight like always. To my surprise, it opened easily. The chains were still there, but somehow the door opened right through them. The inside of the building was darker than I expected, with only dim light coming through dirty windows. But it wasn't empty like it was supposed to be. Someone had been living there, and recently. There were sleeping bags spread out on the floor, empty food containers, and camping equipment. But what really caught my attention were the walls. Someone had covered them with hundreds of hand-drawn maps of downtown Portland. Every map showed the same thing: specific intersections marked with red circles. I looked closer at the marked locations. My blood went cold. They were exactly the places where I had been seeing the gray suit man over the past 2 weeks. Every single spot was marked on these maps. But there were more marked locations than I had seen him at. Dozens more. It was like someone was tracking not just where I'd seen him, but where he was going to appear next. Scattered around the sleeping bags were notebooks and journals. I picked one up and started reading. The handwriting was perfectly neat, like it had been written by a machine instead of a human hand. Every letter was exactly the same size and shape. The journal contained detailed observations about people's daily routines. There were entries about office workers, shop employees, and delivery drivers. Each entry included descriptions of people's appearances, work schedules, and typical routes through the city. Then I found my name. Tyler Kim, 25, bike messenger for Rush Delivery Services. 5'8", black hair, usually wears red helmet and blue jacket. Works Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Typical route includes Pioneer Square, Pearl District, Courthouse area. Rides Trek mountain bike, license number B4471. Lives in Hawthorne District. The entry went on to describe my exact daily schedule, including which buildings I delivered to most often and what time I usually took my lunch break. Whoever wrote this had been watching me for months, learning my patterns. I flipped through more pages and found similar entries for other messengers I knew. Jake, Sarah, even messengers from other companies. Someone was studying all of us. I heard footsteps upstairs and decided to investigate. The stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed to the second floor. What I found there made my hands shake. The entire second floor had been turned into some kind of surveillance center. There were computer monitors everywhere, showing live feeds from street cameras all over downtown Portland. I recognized most of the intersections. They were the same ones marked on the maps downstairs. The cameras were focused on busy areas where messengers and delivery drivers worked. Pioneer Square, the courthouse, the Pearl District, the bus mall. Whoever was running this operation could watch the movements of every delivery worker in the city. There was also radio equipment that looked like it could intercept phone calls and text messages. Computer servers hummed quietly in the corner, processing all the information being collected. I realized that someone was using this equipment to track people like me. They were studying our behavior, learning our patterns, maybe even predicting where we'd go next. You shouldn't be here. I spun around. The gray suit man was standing in the doorway, but now he looked different. More solid, more real than he had ever appeared on the streets. His pale skin had actual color, and his eyes weren't blank anymore. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What is all this?" He walked into the room, his footsteps making actual sounds on the floor. My name isn't important. What matters is that you've discovered something you weren't supposed to find. Are you stalking us? Why are you watching messengers? He gestured to the monitors showing downtown Portland. I'm part of a monitoring program designed to study human behavior patterns in urban environments. Your job makes you an ideal subject because you travel to every part of the city on predictable schedules. I looked at the screens, then back at him. You're studying us like lab rats. In a way, yes, but not for harmful purposes. We're trying to understand how people move through cities, how they make decisions about routes and timing. This information helps improve traffic flow, city planning, emergency response. We? Who's we? He hesitated. I'm not entirely human, Tyler. I'm what you might call an artificial entity, created to blend in with city populations and gather data. The monitoring program has been running in major cities for several years. He showed me computer files containing detailed profiles of hundreds of Portland residents. Not just messengers, but office workers, shoppers, tourists, students. Each profile included daily routines, behavioral patterns, and movement predictions. The data is transmitted to research facilities that study urban planning and population management, he explained. The goal is to make cities more efficient and safer for everyone. I looked at my own profile on the screen. It contained information I had never told anyone: my favorite coffee shop, the route I took home from work, even what time I usually went to bed. How long have you been watching me? 6 months. You and 47 other delivery workers in the Portland area. Your jobs give you unique access to all parts of the city, and your routes create excellent data about traffic patterns and pedestrian flow. The whole thing felt like something out of a science fiction movie. Why did you let me see you? Why didn't you stay invisible? Because you were particularly observant. Most people don't notice patterns the way you do. I needed to evaluate whether you posed a risk to the monitoring program. He turned to face me directly. I have a proposition for you, Tyler. You can help us collect better data about delivery workers and their routes. In exchange, I can show you more about how the monitoring program works and what we're really studying. I stared at him, trying to process what he was asking. You want me to spy on my coworkers? I want you to help us understand how to make your job safer and more efficient. The data we collect could lead to better bike lanes, improved traffic signals, safer delivery routes. But we need insider perspective from someone who actually does the work. The offer was tempting in a weird way. Part of me wanted to understand more about what he was and who was behind the monitoring program. But another part of me was horrified by the idea of helping spy on people without their permission. What if I say no, then you leave, and you never see me again? The monitoring program continues, but without your participation, your life goes back to normal. And if I say yes, you gain access to information that could change how cities work. You become part of something bigger than just delivering packages. I looked around the surveillance room one more time. All those monitors, all that data about people's private lives. It felt wrong, even if the stated purpose was to help people. I need time to think about this, I said finally. He nodded. I understand. This is not a decision to make lightly. I headed for the stairs, then stopped. What's your real name? I don't have one in the way you understand names. I'm more of a function than a person. That answer gave me chills. I left the building and rode my bike back out into the normal world, but everything felt different now. Since that day, I still see the gray suit man during my deliveries. But now when our eyes meet, he nods slightly, like he's waiting for my answer about joining his monitoring program. I haven't decided yet. Part of me is curious about what else he could show me, what other secrets the city might be hiding. But part of me is terrified of becoming involved in something that could hurt innocent people. I've thought about reporting him to the police, but what would I tell them? That an artificial entity is running surveillance on the city? They'd think I was crazy. And I still don't know if what he's doing is actually illegal or if it might somehow help people. The worst part is not knowing who's really behind the monitoring program. Is it the government, a private company, something else entirely? And what are they planning to do with all that data about how we live our lives? I still ride my routes every day, delivering packages and documents around downtown Portland. But now I know I'm being watched, studied, analyzed. Every turn I make, every street I choose, every break I take. It's all being recorded somewhere. Sometimes I wonder if other cities have gray suit men too, watching their messengers and delivery drivers. Sometimes I wonder if this is happening everywhere, and we just don't notice. For now, I keep doing my job and avoiding the abandoned building on Southwest 2nd Avenue. But I know he's still there, waiting with his cameras and computers and endless questions about human behavior. And someday, I'm going to have to decide whether to help him or try to stop him. The choice is mine, but I'm running out of time to make it. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and what I'm about to tell you happened to me 3 years ago at Crater Lake National Park. The Park Service made me sign papers saying I'd never talk about this, but they can't stop me now. I don't work for them anymore. I can't work anywhere anymore. Before you dismiss this as another cryptid story, you need to understand something. I'm not some weekend hiker who got spooked in the woods. I was a park ranger for 12 years. I had wilderness survival training, law enforcement certification, and I dealt with everything from armed poachers to mother bears protecting cubs. I thought I knew what danger looked like. I was wrong about everything. It started with David Chen going missing. David was a seasonal ranger, 26 years old, who'd been working the remote north section for 2 months. He was supposed to radio in every 6 hours, but on July 15, 2022, his radio went silent. When the search team found his truck 3 days later, it looked like he'd left in a hurry. His door was open, keys still in the ignition, and his radio was on the seat, still working perfectly. But David was gone, and so was all his gear except for one thing. His service weapon was on the ground near the truck. All 6 rounds had been fired. The official report said David probably got disoriented and wandered off. They suggested he might have fired warning shots at a bear before getting lost in the wilderness. His body was never found, but after 2 weeks, they called off the search. I knew better. David wasn't the type to panic, and he definitely wasn't the type to abandon his post without radioing for help first. That's when Ranger Williams asked me to take over David's patrol route. Someone had to monitor the remote trails, and I had the most experience with dangerous wildlife. I should have said no. I should have asked more questions about what really happened to David. Instead, I said yes, because I thought I could handle anything those woods could throw at me. Within a week of taking over David's route, I started getting the reports. Hikers coming back to the visitor center with stories that made no sense. They talked about hearing sounds in the forest that were unlike any animal they'd ever encountered. But these weren't typical, something scary in the woods stories. These people were traumatized, really traumatized. A family from Salem came to my station completely shaken up. The father was a veteran who'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan, but his hands were shaking as he told me what happened. They'd been hiking the North Rim Trail when they heard what he described as something massive breathing in the trees, like it was trying to stay quiet but couldn't. Then the sound started following them. Heavy footsteps keeping pace with their hiking, always staying just out of sight in the thick forest. When they stopped, the footsteps stopped. When they walked faster, the footsteps matched their pace. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. The father said that near the end of their hike, they heard something else. Human voices calling for help from deep in the forest. Voices that sounded like they were in pain. When I asked him to describe the voices, he went completely pale. He said one of them sounded young, like a man in his 20s, and it kept repeating the same phrase over and over. "Please, I'm hurt. Please help me." I knew David Chen was 26 years old. I started David's patrol route the next morning, armed with everything I thought I'd need. My service weapon, bear spray, radio, GPS, emergency beacon, and enough supplies for 3 days in the backcountry. The north section was remote. Really remote. The nearest road was 12 miles away, and cell phone coverage was non-existent. It was the kind of place where if something went wrong, you were completely on your own until your next scheduled radio check. The forest felt wrong from the moment I stepped onto the trail. I'd hiked these mountains for 8 years, and I knew what normal wilderness sounded like. This was different. Too quiet. No bird songs, no squirrel chatter, no insect noise. Just an oppressive silence that made every footstep sound like thunder. About 2 miles in, I found the first set of tracks. They were in a muddy section near a stream crossing, 2 footprints that looked human at first glance, but something was off about them. They were too big, maybe size 15 or 16, and they were pressed deep into the earth like whoever made them was carrying enormous weight. But the stride length was what really bothered me. Normal human steps are about 2.5 feet apart. These tracks showed someone taking 4-foot strides, which would require legs that were impossibly long. I photographed everything and took GPS coordinates. My equipment was working perfectly at that point. Clear radio signal, accurate GPS readings, fully charged batteries. That changed fast. By noon, my radio started picking up interference. Not static, something worse. Faint voices talking in what sounded like a mixture of English and something else. Something old. The voices were hard to make out, but I kept hearing fragments. He's coming back, and shouldn't have left the offering, and the treaty is broken. When I tried to radio headquarters for my scheduled check-in, the signal was completely garbled. All they could hear on their end was static mixed with what they described as animal sounds. My GPS unit started acting up around the same time. The coordinates would flicker and change, showing me in locations that were miles away from where I actually was. Sometimes it showed me in places that didn't exist on any map. Coordinates that placed me in the middle of Crater Lake itself, 200 feet underwater. I changed the batteries in both devices, but the problems got worse. By late afternoon, my GPS was showing coordinates that placed me in different states entirely. Oregon, then Nevada, then somewhere in Canada. That's when I realized I was being herded. The trail I was following should have led back toward the main visitor area, but somehow I was getting deeper into the wilderness. The terrain was becoming more rugged, more isolated, and completely unfamiliar. That's when I smelled it. A stench so powerful it made my eyes water. The smell of rotting meat mixed with something else. Something wild and musky that I'd never encountered before. I followed the smell to a natural depression in the forest floor. Maybe 30 feet across and surrounded by thick brush. What I found there will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was a feeding ground. Bones scattered everywhere, some animal, some that looked disturbingly human. Rib cages picked clean, skulls with holes punched through them, long bones that had been cracked open to get at the marrow inside. But it was the fresh remains that made me understand the true horror of what I'd stumbled into. A Park Service uniform, torn to shreds and soaked in dried blood. A name tag that read D. Chen. And hanging from a tree branch like some kind of trophy was David's radio, still crackling with static. That's when I heard the breathing behind me. I turned around slowly and saw them standing at the edge of the clearing. Not one creature, 3 of them. Each about 9 feet tall, covered in dark fur, standing upright like humans but with proportions that were completely wrong. Their arms hung down past their knees, ending in hands with claws that looked like they could tear through steel. Their faces were a nightmare mixture of human and something else. Intelligent eyes that held a malevolent understanding, but mouths full of teeth designed for tearing flesh. But the worst part was their behavior. They weren't acting like animals. They were coordinating, communicating with each other through low grunts and clicks. One of them pointed at me with a clawed finger, and the others spread out to surround me. They'd been hunting me, herding me to this place with their electromagnetic interference, cutting off my communications, and leading me exactly where they wanted me to go. One of them opened its mouth and spoke. Not growls or animal sounds, actual words in a voice that sounded like gravel being ground together. You found offering. Then it gestured toward David's remains, and I understood. David Chen hadn't gotten lost or been killed by accident. He'd been hunted, killed, and left here as a message, a warning to other humans to stay away from their territory. But I'd ignored the warning, and now I was going to join him. I drew my service weapon and fired 3 shots center mass at the closest creature. The bullets hit it square in the chest, but it just staggered back a step and looked down at the wounds with what I can only describe as mild annoyance. Then it smiled, showing me those massive teeth, and let out a sound that wasn't quite a roar and wasn't quite laughter. I ran. The forest erupted in chaos behind me as all 3 creatures gave chase. They moved through the trees like they were built for it, crashing through brush that slowed me down, leaping over fallen logs that I had to climb around. I could hear them communicating as they hunted, calling to each other with that mixture of clicks and growls. They were working together, one driving me forward while the others moved to cut off escape routes. My radio crackled to life, and I heard David Chen's voice coming through the static. "Sarah, don't run toward the lake. They're waiting." I don't know how that was possible. David had been dead for weeks, but his voice was clear and desperate, trying to warn me even from whatever hell he'd been dragged into. I changed direction, heading away from the lake toward what I hoped was the Ruminipal main trail. Behind me, I heard one of the creatures let out a frustrated roar that echoed through the entire forest. I found a massive pine tree and started climbing, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the branches. About 30 feet up, I found a thick branch that could support my weight and tried to catch my breath. Below me, the 3 creatures emerged into the clearing. But they weren't alone anymore. More of them came out of the forest. 5, then 7, then 10. A whole pack of these things, all of them looking up at me with those intelligent, malevolent eyes. One of them, larger than the others, walked over to the base of my tree and spoke again. "You cannot leave. You have seen the feeding place." Its voice was getting clearer, more human-like, as if it was remembering how to speak our language. "Others must not know. The treaty must be protected." That's when I understood the full scope of what was happening. These creatures had been living in the remote areas of the park for years, maybe decades, and someone in the Park Service knew about them. There was an agreement, a treaty, that kept humans out of certain areas in exchange for the creatures staying hidden. David Chen had violated that treaty somehow, and he'd paid for it with his life. Now I was going to pay the same price. I stayed in that tree for 18 hours while the creatures took turns guarding me below. They were patient, methodical, waiting for exhaustion or thirst to drive me down to them. But something I didn't expect happened. Around dawn, I heard helicopters in the distance. Search and rescue choppers, flying a grid pattern over the forest. The creatures heard them too, and for the first time since I'd encountered them, they looked nervous, agitated. The big one that had spoken to me let out a series of clicks and grunts, and most of the pack melted back into the forest. Only 3 remained below my tree when the beep helicopter spotted me. I flagged them down with my emergency mirror, and they lowered a rescue harness. As they pulled me up toward the chopper, I looked down and saw the 3 remaining creatures watching me go. The big one pointed a clawed finger at me and spoke one last time, loud enough that I could hear it over the helicopter rotors. "If you tell, we will find you." Back at headquarters, Ranger Williams was waiting for me with 2 men in suits who introduced themselves as Federal Wildlife Management Specialists. They debriefed me for 6 hours, recording everything I said about my encounter. Then they told me I'd suffered a psychotic break brought on by stress and isolation. They said I'd been found in my tree talking to hallucinations, firing my weapon at shadows. David Chen, they explained, had simply gotten lost and died of exposure somewhere in the wilderness. The official report stated that I'd experienced a complete mental breakdown and was being medically retired from the Park Service due to PTSD. They gave me a disability pension and made me sign documents agreeing never to discuss my hallucinations with media, researchers, or other law enforcement agencies. But they couldn't explain why my service weapon was missing 3 bullets when the rescue team found me. They couldn't explain the claw marks on the tree I'd climbed. And they couldn't explain why satellite imagery from that day showed large heat signatures moving through the forest in coordinated patterns. 3 years later, I'm telling this story because I can't stay silent anymore. I've tried to rebuild my life, tried to convince myself it was all stress-induced hallucinations, but I know what I saw. Those creatures are still out there in the remote areas of Crater Lake, and they have an arrangement with someone in the federal government. Certain areas are kept off limits to the public, and in exchange, the creatures stay hidden and don't venture into populated areas. But sometimes people stumble into their territory by accident. Hikers who get lost, rangers who patrol too far into the restricted zones, researchers who ask too many questions. When that happens, people disappear. The Park Service reports them as missing persons who got lost in the wilderness. Search teams look for a few days, then call it off due to difficult terrain or weather conditions. The families are told their loved ones probably fell into a ravine or were killed by wildlife. But I know the truth. They're being taken to feeding grounds like the one I found, killed, and left as offerings to maintain a treaty that keeps ancient predators hidden from the modern world. I'm telling you this because you need to know what's really happening in our national parks. If you're planning to visit Crater Lake, stay on the marked trails. Don't hike alone in the remote areas. And if you hear voices calling for help from deep in the forest, don't investigate. Those voices aren't human anymore. They're bait, recordings of previous victims being used to lure new prey into the feeding grounds. Since my encounter, I've been contacted by other Park Service employees who've had similar experiences. Rangers from Olympic National Park, Yellowstone, and Glacier have all described encounters with creatures that shouldn't exist, followed by federal cover-ups and forced retirements. We're being silenced because the truth would cause panic. People would stop visiting national parks, tourism revenue would collapse, and the careful balance between civilization and these ancient predators would be destroyed. But the cost of that silence is human lives. People are dying to maintain a secret that protects creatures that see us as nothing more than food. I can't sleep at night knowing that families are losing loved ones to things that should only exist in nightmares. That's why I'm breaking my silence, even though I know it puts me in danger. Because 3 weeks ago, I found fresh claw marks on my apartment door, and sometimes, late at night, I hear breathing outside my windows. They know I'm talking, and they're coming for me. If something happens to me, if I disappear or have an accident, you'll know I was telling the truth. And maybe someone else will have the courage to keep telling this story, even when the monsters come knocking at their door. The treaty is broken. The feeding grounds are active, and no one in authority wants you to know. Stay out of the deep woods. Trust no one in uniform who tells you these places are safe, and if you see something that shouldn't exist, run. Don't look back, don't try to help, and don't trust the voices that call your name from the shadows, because some hunts never end. My name is Captain Bill Santos, and I've been commercial fishing out of Newport, Oregon for 15 years. I started when I was 27, fresh out of the Coast Guard, thinking I knew everything about the ocean. My dad ran fishing boats before me, and his dad before him. The sea was in my blood, or so I thought. I've weathered storms that would scare most people onto dry land forever. I've pulled in nets so heavy they nearly capsized my boat. But what happened in September 2021, about 20 miles offshore, didn't just change what I thought I knew about these waters. It changed what I thought I knew about being human. The thing is, when you spend your whole life on the ocean, you think you've seen it all. You get comfortable. You start believing you're at the top of the food chain out there. That was my first mistake. My last mistake was not turning around when I had the chance. September 15th, 2021 started like any other day. Perfect weather, calm seas, and my crew was in good spirits. I was running my 36-foot commercial fishing vessel, Pacific Dream, with 4 guys I'd worked with for years. There was Jake, my deckhand who'd been with me since he was 19. Carlos, my engineer who could fix anything. Tommy and Rick, both experienced fishermen who knew these waters. We left Newport Harbor at 4 a.m., heading for our usual rockfish grounds about 20 miles out. The Furuno fish finder was showing good readings, and the GPS had us right where we wanted to be. Water temperature was perfect at 58 degrees. No wind, visibility for miles. Days like this, you make your money. Our first few sets went perfectly. We were using bottom trawl nets, dragging them along the seafloor at about 180 feet deep. Every haul came up packed with lingcod, rockfish, and some nice petrel sole. By noon, we had nearly 800 pounds in the hold. That's when Carlos found the first body. "Captain!" he screamed from the sorting table. "Jesus Christ, Captain!" Tangled in our net, wrapped in kelp and barely recognizable, was what remained of a human torso. No head, no arms, just a torso in a torn yellow rain jacket with Lisa Marie stitched on the chest, the name of a fishing vessel that had gone missing 3 weeks earlier with all hands. "Get it off my boat," Tommy whispered, backing away. "Get it off right now." But as Carlos tried to untangle the remains, more pieces started falling out of the net. A bloated arm, part of a leg still wearing a rubber boot. Chunks of something that might have been human but were too decomposed to tell. "We need to call the Coast Guard," I said, reaching for the radio. But when I keyed the mic, all I got was static. Complete radio silence on all channels. "That's impossible," Jake said. The radio was working fine this morning. I tried the satellite phone. Nothing. Even our emergency beacon wasn't responding. We were completely cut off from the outside world. That's when my sonar started showing something massive moving beneath our boat. At first, the sonar return looked like a school of fish, 19 a T, this massive shape maybe 60 feet long, moving about 30 feet off the bottom. But fish don't move like that. This thing was tracking us, staying directly under our hull, no matter which direction I turned the boat. That's gotta be a whale, Jake said, but his voice was shaking. I've seen whales on sonar before. They move in straight lines, surfacing every few minutes to breathe. This thing was following our exact course changes, like it was hunting us. When I turned the boat to port, it turned with us. When I slowed down, it slowed down. Whales don't do that, I told him. And whales don't eat people. Carlos came up from the engine room, his face pale. The engine temperature's spiking, and I can't figure out why. It's like something's interfering with the cooling system. That's when the proximity alarm started screaming. The sonar showed whatever was down there was rising fast, coming straight for us. Everyone get inside the wheelhouse, I ordered. Now. We huddled together, watching the sonar screen as that massive return got closer and closer to the surface. The boat started rocking, not from waves, but from something moving beneath us. Then we heard it, a sound like nothing I'd ever experienced. It started as a low vibration that I felt in my bones, then built into something like whale song but wrong. Alien, the sound of something that didn't belong in our world. Look at the water, Rick whispered. The ocean around our boat was turning dark. Not the natural darkness of deep water, but something else. Something thick and oily that seemed to absorb light. And in that darkness, things were moving. We need to get out of here, I said, gunning the engine toward shore. But the thing beneath us wasn't done with us yet. The first attack came without warning. Something massive slammed into our hull from below, lifting the entire boat 6 feet out of the water. We crashed back down, and I heard the horrible sound of fiberglass cracking. We're taking on water, Carlos shouted from below. Jake was screaming, pointing at the water off our starboard side. That's when I saw it surface for the first time. It wasn't a whale. It wasn't anything that should exist. The head that broke the surface was 12 feet long and shaped like a serpent, but covered in what looked like human skin. Pale, bloated flesh stretched over a skull too large for any earthly creature. But it was the eyes that made me understand we were all going to die out there. They were human eyes, dozens of them, set into the creature's skull like jewels, blinking at different intervals, all staring at us with human intelligence and infinite hunger. "Oh God," Tommy whispered, "those are people's eyes." The creature opened its mouth, and we could see rows of teeth that weren't teeth at all. They were human, bones. Femurs, ribs, skulls, all somehow fused together into a grinding mechanism designed to process human flesh. And then it spoke, not with words, but directly into our minds. I could hear it inside my skull, speaking in the voices of every fisherman who had ever disappeared in these waters. Asterisk. "You found our pieces, asterisk," it said in Captain Morrison's voice, the skipper of the Lisa Marie. Asterisk. "Now you join us." Asterisk. The thing dove again, and seconds later our boat was lifted completely out of the water. But this time, it wasn't gentle. We were caught in coils of something that felt like muscle wrapped in human skin, being squeezed slowly, deliberately. Through the wheelhouse windows, I could see we were being carried down. The water was getting darker and darker as we descended, and I realized the creature wasn't just carrying us, it was taking us to its lair. "The emergency scuba gear," I gasped to Carlos, in the stern compartment. But when he tried to move, the coils tightened around the boat. The fiberglass hull started to crack and splinter. Water began pouring in through gaps that opened like wounds. That's when I saw the other boats. Scattered across the seafloor in the creature's nest were dozens of fishing vessels in various stages of decay. Some were recent. I recognized the Lisa Marie, the Portland Rose that had vanished last year, the Cassandra from 2 years ago. Others were older, covered in barnacles and seaweed, their hulls split open like broken eggs. And moving among the wrecks were things that had once been human. The crews of these boats hadn't died when their vessels were destroyed. They had been changed, transformed into pale, elongated things that swam through the water with too many joints in their limbs and gills cut into their necks. They still wore pieces of their fishing gear, rain jackets, boots, life vests, but their bodies had been stretched and modified to survive in the deep. One of them pressed its face against our wheelhouse window. It had been a woman once, I could tell from the bone structure, but her eyes had been replaced with black pits that seemed to go on forever. When she opened her mouth, water poured out along with a sound like crying, asterisk. "Join us," asterisk, she gurgled. Asterisk, "Join us in the deep." Asterisk, the creature began to position our boat among the others, like a collector adding a new piece to a display. I realized this thing had been taking fishing boats for decades, maybe longer, keeping the crews alive in some twisted form to serve it. "We're not dying like this," I told my crew. "Not becoming those things." The emergency flare gun was in a waterproof box near the helm. If I could get to it, maybe cause enough pain or distraction to make the creature let go. But as I reached for the box, one of the transformed crew members smashed through the wheelhouse window. Water rushed in as the thing grabbed Jake by the throat with fingers that had too many joints. "Help me," Jake screamed, but his voice was already changing, becoming watery and strange. I got the flare gun and fired it directly into the creature's main body. The phosphorus burned through its flesh like acid, and it released us with a shriek that shattered every piece of glass on the boat. We shot toward the surface like a cork, the creature thrashing behind us. But I knew it wasn't giving up. Things like this don't give up. They're patient. They can wait. "The engine," I shouted to Carlos. "Everything you've got." The Caterpillar diesel roared to life, and we started racing toward shore. But looking back, I could see the creature following us, just beneath the surface. And it was gaining. That's when Jake started changing. The thing that had grabbed him had done something to him in those few seconds of contact. His skin was turning pale and waxy, and when he opened his mouth to speak, water poured out. "I can hear them," he said in a voice that wasn't quite his anymore. "They're calling me home." Before any of us could stop him, Jake threw himself overboard. I watched him disappear beneath the dark water, swimming down toward the creature with motions that were too fluid, too graceful for any human. We made it back to Newport, but not all of us came back human. The Coast Guard found Jake's body 3 days later, washed up on Agate Beach. The official report said he drowned, but I saw what they pulled out of the water. His gills had started to form. His fingers were webbed. His eyes were gone, replaced by empty sockets that seemed to go on forever. I tried to tell them about the creature, about the graveyard of fishing boats on the seafloor, about the things that used to be human swimming among the wreckage. They said it was trauma, that losing a crew member at sea can cause hallucinations. But Tommy and Rick knew what we'd seen. They quit fishing the next day and moved inland. Carlos lasted a week before he couldn't take the nightmares anymore and ate his gun in his garage. I kept fishing, but never in those waters again. Never past the 10-mile limit, never alone. But it doesn't matter how careful I am. The thing knows where I live now. It followed me home. Every night, I hear Jake's voice calling from the harbor. When I look out my bedroom window, I can see shapes moving beneath the water between the docked boats. Pale things that swim with too many joints in their limbs. The disappearances started again 3 months after our encounter. First, it was tourists who went swimming alone. Then, a couple of divers exploring the reefs. Last week, a family on a pleasure cruise vanished without a trace. The thing is recruiting, building its collection, and I know it's only a matter of time before it comes for me. I'm writing this down because someone needs to know the truth about what's in the waters off Newport. The official reports will say I drowned or had an accident or just disappeared like so many fishermen before me. But the truth is simpler and more horrible than that. There are things in the deep that collect us, things that have been collecting us for longer than this town has existed. They don't kill us, death would be mercy. They change us, transform us into something that can survive in their world, serve their needs. And they're patient. They can wait as long as it takes. If you're reading this, stay away from the water. Don't trust the fishing reports that say the waters off Newport are safe. Don't believe the Coast Guard when they say it's just equipment failure or bad weather taking our boats. The ocean remembers everything that falls into it. And some things that fall never stop falling. I can hear Jake calling me from the harbor right now. His voice sounds so lonely, so cold. He's telling me it's time to come home. The water is so dark tonight. So deep, so welcoming. Asterisk, Captain Bill Santos's journal was found in his empty house 3 days after his fishing boat was discovered drifting unmanned 12 miles offshore. His body was never recovered. The official Coast Guard report listed him as lost at sea. This was the 7th unexplained disappearance of a Newport fisherman in 2021. Asterisk.